So the next time someone tells you that your concerns about the security of these voting systems are without basis, you should say, well, look at this decision here. I was talking about a few weeks ago a major court decision in Georgia by a left-leaning judge, by all accounts, in the Northern District of Georgia. And it was a case filed by citizens or a group concerned about election systems and election voting systems and such. And I looked into the plaintiffs. I didn't recognize them, but they looked to be like a mix of folks who are Republican, conservative, maybe Democrat, liberal. I couldn't really tell. And the decision allowing their case to go forward is an astonishing one in light of really exposing, if you want to talk about the big lie that there are no legitimate concerns about the way our elections are being conducted here in the United States, specifically in Georgia, and specifically through the use of these computer voting systems to collect and tabulate votes. In this case, the dispute was about the use of Dominion voting machines in Georgia. Now, they're trying to jail people for raising these same concerns, by the way, right now in Fulton County. Jack Smith is doing it up here in Washington, D.C. against Trump, too. This federal judge says those concerns are at least good enough to go to trial. And I thought, because no one is going to tell you about what that judge said, I'm going to tell you what the judge said. I'm going to read it to you. If I can find it again. Of course, I just... Give me a second. I got to go do my little search for it. It was in the Northern District of Georgia. So I filed this tweet. I guess I should ask Jack Smith to send me a copy. It was earlier this month. A federal court in the Northern District of Georgia, which is the Atlanta division, now they're going to allow these plaintiffs to proceed to trial after they presented expert evidence which found 7 core vulnerabilities in the Dominion voting systems there being used across the state. And this is a quote from the opinion. So this is what the expert presented that the court found sufficient to warrant going to trial over. Because the allegation is, if I can't trust my vote to count, my voting rights under the Constitution are harmed. And the judge is going to allow that to go to trial, more or less. Number 1, attackers can alter the QR codes on printed ballots to modify voter selections. So what was happening in Georgia, as I understand it, is that you make your selection on the machine, right, the computer, and you get a written receipt that has what looks to be your selections, but also a QR code which supposedly mimics what you can see as your selections. And the expert said, well, someone can mess with it in a way to make the QR code to incorrectly show your selections, and the QR code is what's used to finally count your ballot. I think I'm describing it correctly. Anyone with brief physical access to the BMD, the ballot marking device, machines can install malware onto the machines. Attackers can forge and manipulate the smart cards that a BMD and ballot marking device uses to authenticate technicians, poll workers, and voters, which could then be used by anyone with physical access to the machines to install malware onto those ballot marking devices. Attackers can execute arbitrary code with supervisory privileges and then exploit it to spread malware to all BMDs across the county or state. Attackers can also alter the BMD's audit logs. I guess that would make it impossible to check if something happened, right? You do the audit doesn't show anything. Attackers with brief access to a single BMD or a single poll worker card and PIN can obtain the county-wide cryptographic keys, which are used for authentication and to protect election results on scanner memory cards. A dishonest election worker with just brief access to the ICP scanner memory card could determine how individual voters voted. There's my tweet there. The main conclusions of the expert analysis on the Georgia computerized Dominion voting systems, as described by the court, are as follows here. You see that there. The ICX BMDs, which is essentially Dominion's ballot marking devices, are not sufficiently secured against technical compromise to withstand vote-altering attacks by bad actors who are likely to attack future elections in Georgia. Those machines can be compromised to the same extent as or more easily than the AccuVote TS and TX DREs they replaced. So initially these folks came in and they were complaining about the prior machines, and they came up with new machines and they're not much better. That's kind of what the court's saying there. Despite the addition of a paper trail, ICX malware can still change individual votes in most election outcomes without detection. Although outcome-changing fraud conducted in this manner could be detected by a risk-limiting audit, Georgia requires a risk-limiting audit of only one contest every 2 years. So the vast majority of elections and contests have no such assurance. And even the most robust risk-limiting audit can only assess an election outcome. It cannot evaluate whether individual votes counted as intended. The vulnerabilities also make it possible for an attacker to compromise the auditability of the ballots by altering both the QR codes. You know what a QR code is? I mentioned it earlier. It's the square barcode looking things you've seen. You take a picture of them with your phone and it sends you to a website. It gives you something, right? If you don't know what it is, you can look it up. By altering both the QR codes and the human readable text, such cheating could not be detected by a risk-limiting audit or even a hand count, since all records of the voter's intent would be wrong. See, that's the trouble with these these audits. They said the audits didn't find anything. Well, if they're auditing bad data that they don't know is bad or compromised, they're just reconfirming something terrible that happened in terms of potential fraud. I mean, it seems to me an obvious point, but I'm glad a judge is confirming it. Using vulnerable BMDs, the Dominion ballot marking devices, for all in-person voters, as Georgia does, greatly magnifies the security risk compared to jurisdictions that use hand-marked paper ballots to provide BMDs to voters upon request. And I know in the District of Columbia, like for instance, I don't think it's the same now. So you had a choice to use a ballot marking device that was completely computerized, right? And or they gave you a sheet and you could fill in the circles, with your pencil as to your selections, and you bring the sheet over to the ballot official and they'd run it through the scanner, right? And that's probably a lot of the way a lot of jurisdictions vote that way. And what they're saying here is that a more secure way to vote, according to the expert the judge is citing approvingly, is that ballot marking devices that are kind of available as an option are better with the option, obviously, to do paper ballots is more secure. And it makes a certain amount of sense because you don't know who's going to be using the ballot marking device. And it mitigates the risk. I mean, no election's going to be perfect, right? You want reasonable steps to be taken to mitigate the risk of fraud. Okay? And what this judge is concluding, that there's enough evidence to suggest those reasonable steps haven't been taken in Georgia or statewide. Really significant decision, don't you think? The critical vulnerabilities of the ICX and the wide variety of lesser but still serious security issues indicate it was developed without sufficient attention to security during design, software engineering, and testing. It would be extremely difficult to retrofit security into a system that was not initially produced with such a process. Boy, oh boy. And something which I didn't quote is that we've talked about CISA, right? The Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Administration. And they're supposed to be helping, not spying on Americans and getting them censored, helping through best practices and kind of warning people about cybersecurity risks related to elections. That was one of the reasons it was set up. It quickly kind of veered away from that. But they looked at the Georgia election systems and noted some of these same vulnerabilities, right? And this was just recently. And they didn't say that we had evidence that there was fraud that took place, and there's a debate there. But they said there are these steps that you should take to mitigate the potential risks that CISA found, some of which echoes here. And the court noted that virtually none of what CISA recommended has been implemented by the state of Georgia. So this is still a major risk, and it's less than a year before the election now, or maybe less than a year. Whoa. So the question is, what can be done if they win at trial? Okay. And plaintiffs carry a heavy burden to establish a constitutional violation connected to Georgia's BMD, ballot marking devices, electronic voting system, whether in the manner in which the state defendants have implemented the voting system, i.e. that it imposes serious security voting risks and burdens impacting plaintiffs' voting rights, or otherwise. If plaintiffs prevail at trial on one or more of their claims, there are pragmatic, sound, remedial policy measures that could be ordered or agreed upon by the parties, such as 1, providing for the use of printed ballots for vote counting without the use of QR codes, administering a broader scope and number of election audits to address vote count accuracy and other related issues, and 3, implementing other essential cybersecurity measures and policies recommended by the nation's leading cybersecurity experts and firms, including Department of Homeland Security, CISA. So I got a question for you. Have you read anything or heard that a federal court in Georgia found that there's enough evidence that Georgia's voting system, plaintiffs worried about their civil rights, should be able to go to trial on it? Have you read anything or heard anything about these details that I just shared with you? Now, knowing a lot of you probably have, because you're diligent citizens and are interested in these things, but even if you are diligent, you might have missed this. This is a significant ruling. And of course, the left used to be concerned about computer systems related to voting until they thought that, Trump might benefit from it. As I said, the plaintiffs here seem to be an odd mix of left-right. I don't know. And this judge is a liberal. I think she's the Judge Totenberg. I think she's the sister of Nina Totenberg, the notorious NPR reporter. Very far left woman. Doesn't mean she's far left, but Totenberg, I think, is a liberal jurist. So this is an important decision. Don't you agree? So the next time someone tells you that your concerns about the security of these voting systems are without basis, you should say, well, look at this decision here. And I think it's fair to ask your local election systems, did you look at this? Are you doing better than them? I think Dominion, I think, even has a more secure system than this, and I don't think even Georgia's using it. I think that was in the decision as well. But this is an important decision, and this is what I love about Judicial Watch and the work we do via this broadcast. Because you're never going to hear about this but for us and Judicial Watch. And I encourage you to share this information widely. Certainly, if you're in Georgia, you should be asking, what's going on here? What are we going to do about this? I mean, we shouldn't have to wait for a trial for the government to address this. To me, this is significant enough for honest government officials to begin an immediate audit of their systems to see what they can do to ensure that the election is going to be, that you can have better confidence in the election outcome in Georgia, given these security risks that have been outlined in this really powerful court decision. Now, we'll provide a link to the court decision below so you can read it in full. But boy, oh boy, I read that and I was floored. You know, because I've been vaguely aware of the debate. And then I said, what's going on here? When I saw the decision and I read it and I went, whoa. I had to go back like 2 or 3 times to the top to make sure it was what I thought it was in terms of being a federal court and, you know, the significance of the findings. Now, will they win at trial? No, but the judge found this is serious enough that, you know, Georgia's protestations to the contrary that there's no there are wanting. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.